The woman actually used living people to create an army of zombies. She first killed them, and then injected the virus. This caused the living to mutate within minutes. The survivor camp has completely turned into a zombie territory. Can Daryl and Carol safely return to America? The latest spin-off of The Walking Dead in 2024. Daryl Dixon has finally come to an end. The story picks up right where the last season left off. While searching for Daryl, Carol discovered his motorcycle. She learned from the new owner that Daryl had been at a gas station. Carol pushed the motorcycle to the gas station. She lied that her friend's used motorcycle was broken, so she wanted to come and get it fixed. But no one here knew how to repair it. Carol tentatively asked about the previous owner. Maybe he could help me fix the bike. The station leader looked at the bike and recognized it. This is Daryl's motorcycle. He angrily cursed the owner as a bastard. After saying that, he placed a crossbow on the vehicle. Carol realized that this was Daryl's belonging, so she quietly went over to grab it. Carol shot and injured 2 men in quick succession. The men at the station finally realized that the person in front of them was not an ordinary woman, so they quickly explained that Daryl had been taken to France by a boat. The dock was a few miles to the north. Upon hearing this, Carol stole a vehicle from the gas station. She headed in the direction of the dock. When Carol arrived at her destination, she discovered that the place had long been abandoned. In this desolate and ruined apocalypse, where would she find a way to cross the ocean? Carol felt extremely frustrated. Suddenly, things took a turn. The sound of an airplane engine filled the air. Carol quickly leaned out to observe. She knocked a zombie off the roadside. The car crashed into a sign and was totaled. Carol got out and easily killed the zombie. Then she moved in the direction of the airplane. Carol walked until dusk. She finally discovered a camp in the woods. Carol saw a man through the barbed wire. She crouched down to avoid the beam of his flashlight. Carol quietly circled around to look for an exit. She found that the place was filled with traps. Suddenly, Carol came up with an idea. She jumped into the trap and shouted for help. The camp owner Ash came running at the sound. Carol lied that she had been in a car accident. She said she was only here to seek help. Seeing that Carol was quite old and that she had no weapons on her, he immediately released her from the trap. But Ash demanded that once her car was fixed, Carol must leave immediately. Ash led her into the camp due to the unstable generator, so the lights flickered on and off. Ash assigned Carol to the barn. The familiar setting reminded Carol of her daughter Sophia from many years ago. She froze in place, unable to move, until Ash spoke up, which brought Carol back to her senses. Behind the barn stood a makeshift airplane. Although the engine noise would attract zombies, but Ash often flew the plane out. He enjoyed the feeling of being up high. Every afternoon at 3 o'clock, Ash would fly out in his plane. He would also look for car parts to help fix the vehicles, but Ash wouldn't go too far. He never intended to leave the camp. Carol also noticed that, at a specific time, Ash would go alone into the glass greenhouse. She was curious about what was inside, so when Ash flew out in the plane, Carol attempted to enter the greenhouse, but she couldn't open the electronic lock. Carol could only return to the barn and pull out the map. She estimated the distance to France. At this moment, the generator tripped again. As Carol was about to go reset it, she suddenly thought of checking the greenhouse. Unbeknownst to her, the electronic door opened, allowing zombies to easily invade the camp. Carol was unaware that she had caused trouble. She casually entered the greenhouse and invaded someone else's privacy. In the center of the greenhouse was a photo of a boy. Next to it was a wooden music box. Carol opened the lid, and to her surprise, music began to play. The familiar tune brought tears to her eyes. The zombies gathered after hearing the sound. They crashed through the glass to enter the greenhouse. Carol grabbed a flower stand to block the zombies. She formed a barrier with the metal frame. Carol noticed that there was a place above where she could escape, so she began to climb up. Carol finally climbed safely to the top of the greenhouse. As she just poked her head out, Ash returned as well. The glass greenhouse was completely destroyed. Ash suppressed his anger and dealt with the zombies first. Carol felt a deep sense of guilt. She offered to clean up the greenhouse and promised to leave as soon as she finished. Ash gradually calmed down. He said the boy in the photo was his son Avi. In a sense, this greenhouse was a graveyard. Ash's wife passed away early, leaving him to raise his son alone. In a moment of neglect, Avi was attacked by zombies. He was only 7 years old when he was bitten to death. Avi loved airplanes when he was alive. Unexpectedly, a few months after his death, a plane really crashed nearby. Ash felt this was a sign, so he found a manual and assembled the wrecked plane. Ash didn't want to leave his son, so he only flew in this area. Carol had also lost her child. She naturally understood Ash's feelings. As Carol looked at the flowers in the jar, she recalled a conversation with Daryl from years ago. Carol knew she had to find him, so she began to manipulate Ash. She started talking about her husband and daughter. This brought her psychologically closer to Ash. Then Carol lied that before the disaster, her husband took their daughter to France for a visit. She couldn't go with them due to passport issues. Later, the disaster struck, and the family lost contact completely. Carol admitted that she came close to his camp, not to fix her car, but to ask him to take her to France to find her daughter. If you knew that Avi might still be alive, wouldn't you do everything to find him? Ash was deceived by Carol's false story. After hesitating, he agreed to take her to France. However, this journey was bound to be perilous, because they would have to fly over the ocean and cross countries without communication or weather forecasts. Ash mapped out a general route. He decided to make a brief stop in Greenland. To minimize time spent over the open sea, Ash stocked up on a large amount of ethanol fuel to support this long-distance flight. The crops in the greenhouse could also solve their food problem. Of course, Ash had questions. France is so big, where would she start looking? Carol said she knew a relative's address, and she was prepared for the worst. Hearing this, Ash comforted her not to lose hope. This made Carol's conscience uneasy. She couldn't help but ask Ash, "Are you sure you want to leave your son?" Ash said that after his son died, it was his first time leaving the camp. He found the plane then. Perhaps this time there would be unexpected gains. You can only survive by looking forward. Suddenly, an accident occurred. It started to rain heavily in the evening. A lightning bolt struck the generator. Sparks ignited the ethanol in the warehouse. The loud bang and flames attracted a horde of zombies. If this continued, the plane would catch fire too. The two had to take off immediately. As the zombies gathered more and more in the woods, they hurriedly cleared a path. Ash piloted the plane, using the wings to knock away zombies. He successfully took Carol up into the sky. The scene shifted to Daryl. In the last season, he was about to board a merchant ship to leave. Unfortunately, the unlucky kid Lauren chased after him. He was surrounded by several zombies. Daryl had to abandon the ship to save him. He chose to stay in France temporarily, and trained the boy to fight against the undead. Soon after, bad news came from Paris. The Hope Alliance camp, led by the base nest, was attacked by Beauvoir. 3 members were unfortunately captured. Among them were Faroux and Laurent, who had helped Lauren, so the nun wanted to help rescue them. But the leader Lausanne was more worried that Janette would learn of the base's location from the hostages. They could only arrange scouts to investigate. As for rescuing the hostages, they had to wait for the right moment. Daryl disagreed with Lausanne's view. If Janette couldn't get useful information, she would definitely kill the hostages. Lausanne didn't respond directly. He only said he would do everything possible to rescue them. After the meeting ended, he kept Daryl behind to talk. Lausanne subtly pointed out that Daryl's method of training Laurent was too harsh. As God's chosen spiritual leader, Laurent must have a strong sense of empathy. Repeated acts of violence would have a negative impact on him. From this, it's clear that Daryl and Lausanne are not the same kind of person. He couldn't find his place in the base. Daryl could only wait for the next ship to leave as soon as possible. Soon after, Lausanne received news that Janette's convoy was going to transfer a group of hostages from the headquarters to another facility. He would send Massis to intercept the transport team. Upon hearing this, Daryl wanted to help them. Lausanne certainly wouldn't refuse, but he also reminded Daryl that they opposed violence and didn't want to cause too many casualties. Daryl stated that as long as he had a choice, he certainly wouldn't harm lives carelessly. On the day of the operation, Massis's team lay in ambush nearby. If all went according to plan, the traps they set would blow up the front tires of the truck. Then they would seize the opportunity to locate the transport vehicle and rescue the hostages. However, the convoy passed without triggering the bomb. Massis wanted to abort the mission, but Daryl took action directly. He rushed forward and shot out the truck's tires. Daryl led everyone to intercept the truck and rescue the hostages. Janette, shot in the shoulder, got out of the car. Daryl immediately chambered around, ready to kill her. Suddenly, a mine behind them exploded. Janette took advantage of the chaos to escape. However, rescuing the hostages was still a good thing. Lauren happily went out to greet Daryl. Lausanne watched their intimate interaction and felt somewhat uncomfortable. Meanwhile, Ash and Carol were forced to stop on a dirt slope due to a fuel line failure. There were also a few zombies nearby. Carol told Ash to focus on fixing the fuel leak. she stepped forward to deal with the zombies. These monsters were covered in moss, making them look like natural camouflage. Carol didn't notice what was happening at her feet. A zombie suddenly emerged and grabbed her. Carol was about to draw her knife to strike, when another zombie appeared behind her. In a critical moment, Ash came over with a wrench to save her. Just as Carol freed herself, he was grabbed by a zombie. Suddenly, a bullet flew in, successfully killing the zombie behind Ash. The gun was fired by two women. The one with black hair was named Jenny, and the one with red hair was named Hannah. They were climate research experts. They were supposed to be here for a 3-month study, tracking glacier melting. They were trapped here due to the disaster. They hadn't seen a living person for a long time. Jenny took Ash to find some tools, and they prepared to go back to repair the fuel line, while Hannah stayed behind to tend to Carol. The two mentioned the harm this disaster had brought to the world. Carol realized that Hannah was somewhat extreme. She believed that the disaster was the world's way of healing itself. After all, only by eliminating humanity could the environment be protected from further destruction. Seeing Hannah studying the crossbow on the table, Carol instinctively grasped the pen beside her, but her reaction was still a moment too late. Hannah aimed her crossbow at Carol. She didn't want to harm her kind casually, but this was the task Jenny had assigned her. Upon hearing this, Carol worried that Jenny would harm Ash. However, she underestimated the extent of Jenny's madness. Jenny didn't want to kill Ash. Instead, she wanted to have children with him, because Jenny believed that after the disaster, no one wanted to have children. People were unwilling to bring offspring into such a world. But if everyone thought this way, wouldn't humanity be facing extinction? She invited Ash to continue her bloodline with her. Ash was shocked upon hearing this. He wanted to leave with Carol, but Jenny blocked his way, saying, "Your friend is probably dead. If it were someone else, it might really be dangerous." But Carol possessed both intelligence and strength. She could see that Hannah was hesitant to act. Carol then asked in return, "Why should you listen to Jenny? You should pursue what you truly want." Hannah began to waver upon hearing this. She just wanted to leave this place. Carol persuaded her. "You can come with us. You can imagine the probability of a plane landing in such a place. Perhaps our meeting is a chance given to you by fate." Hannah, unwilling to abandon her friend, asked if she could bring Jenny with her. As soon as she finished speaking, Jenny walked in with a gun. Seeing that Carol was still alive, Jenny questioned Hannah why she hadn't acted. Her attitude made Hannah furious. Hannah swiftly turned and shot her dead. Carol comforted her. "You had no choice. There's no need for guilt." Hannah was extremely excited along the way. She was finally about to embrace a new life. Suddenly, Ash fired a flare and killed Hannah. He thought Carol was being held hostage before he took action to kill her. To spare Ash from feeling guilty, Carol said nothing more. When she woke up, they had already arrived in France. Ash piloted the plane to land in a racetrack. They dragged the plane to a concealed spot to hide it. Carol didn't want to involve Ash in any accidents. She was also worried about her lies being exposed. So Carol arranged for Ash to stay behind and watch the plane, and find a way to refuel it.
"If I'm not back in 2 weeks, don't keep waiting."
"I'm not leaving without you."
Carol just walked into the city, and soon saw a military vehicle. The truck was loaded with a large amount of supplies. 2 soldiers got out of the vehicle. They knocked out a homeless man by the roadside, and threw him into the truck. Taking advantage of the situation, Carol stepped forward and stole an apple. She also slashed one of the wheat bags. Carol followed the spilled wheat to a location. The soldiers were distributing food for free. Carol surrendered her weapon, and blended into the crowd to observe. The disaster victims were frantically grabbing food. A female officer shouted to interrupt them. She spoke in French, the gist of which was that, as long as they supported Janette, there would be food and safe shelter. Immediately after, the soldiers surrounded the crowd, forbidding them to move chaotically. Carol realized that something was wrong. She was about to leave, but her movements were noticed by the soldiers. The officer saw that Carol was quite capable. She ordered the soldiers to take Carol away in the truck. An English teacher named Remy was sitting next to Carol. Remy introduced her to the current situation. A woman named Janette planned to rebuild France. Not only was she distributing food, but she would also choose a group of survivors to take with her. Remy's friend Julien was arranged to be on another truck. He suffered from lung disease, and was having increasing difficulty breathing. Remy was very worried about Julien, but the soldiers wouldn't let them ride together. Moreover, the 2 trucks were heading in different directions. The scene shifted back to Daryl. That day, the savior Lauren suddenly went missing. A grappling hook was still hanging from the open windowsill. Downstairs, they found a knocked-out guard. Various signs indicated that someone had kidnapped Lauren. Daryl led a small team to track down the kidnappers. ISA and Faru insisted on joining him. They followed the trail to an old factory. Meanwhile, Sister Sylvie, who stayed at the base, suddenly noticed something wrong. The nun who usually took care of Lauren's daily needs had prepared breakfast as usual. Sister Sylvie hurried to catch up with her. The nun placed the food in front of a tower door. Sylvie waited for her to leave, and then went to confirm. She saw Lauren inside. At the same time, as Daryl led the search, two of his companions began to fight. Daryl instinctively fired his gun, but he realized that his gun had also been tampered with. Fortunately, he reacted quickly and blocked the attack. He threw one of them down the stairs. A woman shooting arrows appeared upstairs. Luckily, ISA acted in time and shot her dead. She recognized that the woman had worked in the stables. On the other side, Faru was startled by the sound of someone falling. The people next to him also began to rebel. Faru was quickly overpowered by the enemies. As the blade was about to stab him, Faru called for help from Emil beside him. However, his friend did nothing to save him. He even aimed his gun at Faru. At this moment, Daryl and ISA arrived. They lowered their weapons and asked Emil what was going on. Emil said that Lausanne would test Lauren the next day to prove that being bitten by a zombie wouldn't cause her to mutate. If Lauren passed the test, no one would ever question her identity again. But with Daryl around, he would definitely interfere with the testing. Then all of the Federation's efforts would be destroyed. So Emil had no choice. Taking advantage of his emotional agitation, Faru knocked the gun from his hand. After this incident, ISA decided to leave with Lauren. ISA asked Daryl, if the previous proposal is still valid, can we come with you? Daryl answered ISA with a kiss. Unbeknownst to them, Lausanne only wanted to temporarily send them away. The real order for the assassination came from a radical named Jacinta near Lausanne. She feared that Lausanne's weakness would jeopardize the plan, so she made the decision on her own. The scene shifted. Janette was interrogating Corden, because at the end of last season, Corden had let Lauren and Daryl go. Before the disaster struck, Janette is just a cleaner at the Louvre Museum. She worked hard, but her colleagues were discontent with the supervisor's style, so they planned to organize a strike in protest, to fight for the respect they deserved. The meeting was interrupted when a phone alarm went off, and they found themselves trapped in the building, unable to leave. Janette's husband came to pick her up, but he was stopped by the security guard outside the building. As the couple communicated over the phone, a zombie outbreak suddenly erupted in the crowd. One of the zombies lunged at her husband and bit him to death right in front of Janette. The Louvre Museum was in disarray. Only the Mona Lisa retained her smile. Now, this masterpiece hangs in the cafeteria of Janette's headquarters. Carol was staring at it in a daze. Janette couldn't help but say, when the disaster struck, they protected the artworks, not the people. So Janette resolved to rebuild social order. Just then, a commotion erupted behind them. A bald man with a tattoo on his forehead flipped his tray in anger because the food was not to his liking, and yelled at the woman serving the food.
Comprends que la nourriture est un bien précieux.
Oui, madame.
Alors ça ne te dérangera pas de manger à même le sol.
The man dared not defy her orders, and could only lick the food off the ground like a dog. No one is allowed to be idle at headquarters. Everyone must work. Carol was assigned to the kitchen, and Remy was assigned to the stables. As the two were talking, they saw a group of people being escorted into the passageway ahead. Unable to resist their curiosity, they followed to see what was happening. They discovered that the headquarters personnel were shooting a group of survivors. They then injected a yellow solution into the necks of the corpses. It seemed they were trying to enhance some ability of theirs after turning into zombies. However, those who had turned into zombies lost all control. The soldiers could only shoot them dead.
Réduis la dose. On veut des soldats qu'on est capable de contrôler.
The gatekeeper discovered the two spying and chased them away. Remy and Carol were worried that Julian or Daryl might also be used as test subjects, so they decided to split up to look for them. On the other side, the test on Lauren was about to begin. Sister Sylvie couldn't bear to see the child bitten by a zombie. She instructed the guard delivering food to let his guard down. Then Sister Sylvie quickly knocked him out. She locked the door and searched for Lauren everywhere, but her noise quickly attracted many guards. Sister Sylvie was cornered on the second-floor terrace with no way out. Lausanne told her not to act rashly. Several soldiers tried to seize the opportunity to subdue her. In her struggle, she fell downstairs and died. Meanwhile, Faru led Daryl and the others go around to the back of the base. They wanted to sneak in from the back to rescue people. As the testing time approached, Lausanne made Lauren drink a sedative tea. so she wouldn't resist when faced with the zombies. At that moment, ISA and the others had already blended into the crowd. A zombie wrapped in a robe was brought to the square. People nearby pulled off the robe, and everyone was shocked. The zombie was none other than the recently deceased sister Sylvie. She slowly approached Lauren. In the next moment, she was shot through by Daryl. The square immediately fell into chaos. ISA and Farouk took the opportunity to take Lauren away. They quickly regrouped with Daryl, but the pursuers soon caught up. Daryl covered the three as they hid in a roadside shack. They couldn't hide forever. He asked Lauren to bring ISA and the other two to the secret training location they had used before. He stayed behind to hold off the pursuers. If Daryl couldn't regroup with them within a day, ISA had to take Lauren away as quickly as possible. There was no need to worry about Daryl's combat ability, but the problem was that there were too many enemies. Even with his skills, his stamina was limited. Daryl slashed at the enemies lunging at him, hoping to escape quickly, but in the blink of an eye, Daryl was trapped in a narrow alley. At the same time, ISA was also in trouble. There were simply too many sentries in the base. She had to split up from Farouk to evade them. Fortunately, he successfully managed to sneak away with Lauren. At that moment, Daryl was brought before Lausanne. The old man attempted to brainwash him, but Daryl was not interested in faith or prophecies. All he knew was that if Lauren was bitten, and there were no miracles, then the child's life would be ruined. The hopes of adults for saving the world should not be forced onto Lauren. The scene shifted back to Carol. She blended into the food distribution team to serve lunch to the survivors, and took the opportunity to inquire about Daryl's whereabouts. However, the people here didn't speak English, and she gained no information. Just as Carol was feeling disappointed, she unexpectedly spotted Corden. Only this person knew Daryl's name. Carol approached him to ask about Daryl's whereabouts, claiming that Daryl was her brother, the only living relative left in her family. Corden finally softened and told her, "There was a castle on the island at Normandy Beach. If you want to go, you must get there before Janette. That woman will not spare Daryl." After Carol left, she immediately went to find Remy to inquire. There was only one place that matched Corden's description: Mont St Michelle. There was no time to waste. She would set off tonight. Carol even invited Remy to come with her, but he couldn't leave Julian behind. Hearing this, Carol no longer hesitated. She knocked out the guard and prepared to find a vehicle to leave, but there were no keys in any of the vehicles. She had no choice but to choose a horse from the yard. Unfortunately, as soon as Carol charged out of the tunnel, she was surrounded. Remy betrayed Carol to save Julian. Janette kept her promise and let the two leave. Now, only she and Carol were left in the office. Janette bluntly stated, "I am creating a new kind of zombie." She wanted to turn them into controllable soldiers, to fight zombies with zombies, to end war with war. No one could stop Janette's plan, so she asked Carol to confess why she had infiltrated the headquarters. Carol had just learned from Corden that Janette had a bad relationship with Daryl, so she lied, claiming she had a grudge against Daryl, that she had come from America to seek revenge. Janette indeed believed her. She also said that Daryl had allied with religious followers. She would arrange for a convoy to attack tomorrow.
You want to kill Dixon yourself? I will take you to him.
The next day, the convoy headed towards Mont St Michelle, passing by the dilapidated Louvre Museum. This triggered many memories for Janette. She had been trapped in the Louvre for a week, and it was the first time she seriously examined those world-famous paintings, especially the painting The Flood. The painting depicted a desperate family trying to withstand the surging floodwaters. Through that painting, Janette came to understand an important issue. In all apocalyptic scenes, humans fantasize about having the power to solve all problems. But Janette knew that prayer and faith were useless. The Hope Alliance, led by Lausanne, was merely attempting to control the masses through religion. On the other side, Lausanne could not find out Lauren's whereabouts, so he could only lock Daryl in a cell. Soon after, ISA was also brought to the adjacent cell. Daryl learned that Lauren had escaped, and he finally felt relieved. The two leaned against the wall, imagining a life outside. Lauren could go to school like a normal child, and they could hike together to watch the sunset by the river. ISA was immersed in the scene Daryl described. Unbeknownst to her, Janette's convoy had already arrived at the foot of the castle. They brought a group of survivors down from the vehicles. Carol was puzzled, wondering why they were bringing so many ordinary people. In the next moment, she saw the syringe in the doctor's hand. It turned out that these survivors had been brainwashed by Janette, and they voluntarily accepted injections to become zombies in order to end the rule of religion. Moreover, Janette had already learned from Remy that Carol was friends with Daryl. She was eager to see the two fight. As the machine guns opened fire, the survivors fell one after another. Carol seized the opportunity to hide among the corpses and play dead. As the soldiers approached to inject, Carol secretly observed and saw that Corden was also tied up at the scene. The corpses piling on top of him began to mutate. She dashed forward to hijack a vehicle. Carol took Corden and fled towards the castle. Her actions led the horde of zombies to the city gates. Janette's men blasted open the gates, allowing the zombies to surge into the city. The soldiers at the entrance were knocked down and bitten. At this critical moment, Corden was willing to stay behind to buy time.
Tell Dixon I did it for the boy.
With Corden diverting the zombies' attention, Carol hurried up the mountain to find Daryl. Meanwhile, Lausanne was interrogating ISA. He wanted to find out Lauren's whereabouts. Of course, she refused to say anything. Just then, a subordinate reported that Janette's revolutionary army had arrived. ISA seized the opportunity to attack Lausanne. Unexpectedly, he stabbed her. Lausanne didn't care if ISA was dead or alive. He hurriedly left with his men, and ISA does have a breath left. She covered her wound and got up to save Daryl, leaving a trail of blood along the way. A zombie caught the scent of blood and charged at her. In the next moment, it was shot dead by Carol. She quickly rushed over to support ISA and used a strip of cloth to cover her abdominal wound. ISA didn't recognize her, and she spoke English. She asked Carol what she was doing here.
Looking for a friend of mine from America.
The scene shifted to Daryl, where Dean was being chased by zombies. He happened to hide in Daryl's cell. Daryl was known for his fighting skills. Dean unlocked his shackles, setting Daryl free to carve a path. One zombie after another died under his command. Daryl was riding a rush of adrenaline, but in the next moment, he froze in place. Daryl saw Carol ahead, and he incredulously rushed forward to hug her. Carol led Daryl to see ISA. The latter is in critical condition due to excessive blood loss. ISA had only one wish: to have Daryl protect Lauren. She breathed her last after leaving her final words. Daryl and Carol left the castle, and Carol said she had found a plane. A kind-hearted person could take them home, but Daryl didn't respond. He only wanted to reach the cave, to reunite with Lauren. Meanwhile, Lausanne was still resisting, but Janette has already led a large army to come before us. The Hope Alliance's base had officially fallen. At noon, Daryl arrived at the cave, but Lauren and Farouk were not there. The campfire on the ground was cold, proving that they had long since left. Carol noticed Daryl was agitated, and she quickly reassured him not to worry. We can search for the child together. The two exchanged updates along the way, and Carol relayed Corden's message. As they walked and talked, they chased all the way to the edge of the forest. Daryl noticed there were more than 2 sets of footprints on the ground, meaning someone had caught up with Lauren. They quickened their pace and walked until late at night, finally arriving at a village. On the sides of the road, several zombies were impaled on farm tools. It makes people feel scared when they see it. Daryl and Carol entered a building, bursting into the only room that was lit. Inside, 2 elderly men were having dinner. They raised their hands and asked, "Are you Daryl and ISA?" It turned out that Lauren and Farouk had indeed been here. The old man even gave them a car. They had left quite some time ago. The old man indicated that there was a broken-down car in the yard. If you can fix it, you can take it. After dawn, Daryl went to check the vehicle. As long as he found a battery or a charged hose, he could get the car running again. The old man said he knew a place where they could find these things. Meanwhile, Carol was helping the elderly woman prepare food. From their conversation, it was clear that they were not married. The woman's husband had passed away years ago. She had intended to find her scattered family, but after meeting the old man, she chose to stay for love. Their relationship was very good. Carol couldn't help but think, if ISA were still alive, Daryl could also find happiness here. Then the two used a mobility cart to push the old man to find tools. The old man greeted zombie neighbors along the way. He and his partner were too old and lacked the strength to bury the dead. They could only lock their neighbors' doors and let them become zombies. After obtaining permission from a nearby resident, he led Daryl and Carol into the garage. There was a car here that could provide parts. The car's owner was a talkative old man. He seemed to be in good spirits and healthy, but the old man privately told Daryl and Carol that he had forgotten everything about the apocalypse. He thought the world was still stuck a few years back. In a sense, he was actually living quite happily. After Daryl found the parts, he returned to fix the car. Carol followed the elderly woman to the barn to look for ethanol. Faced with the familiar wooden door, Carol remembered her daughter's ordeal again. The elderly woman noticed her sad expression, so she stepped forward to comfort Carol. "Everything will pass," she said. At that moment, the sound of a car engine approached. Daryl and Carol hid in the car. A soldier got out and demanded supplies. After receiving the food, he left. The two guessed that Janette had defeated Lausanne and had completely taken over the place. With the plan changing, they decided to stay another night. The next morning, as they were about to leave, the old man invited them to have breakfast first. They couldn't refuse, and had to comply. Halfway through the meal, Janette's men arrived. It turned out that those soldiers had threatened the elderly woman's life. They learned from the old man that Daryl was there. The elderly woman stepped forward to take the old man's gun, scolding him for being too foolish. At that moment, Janette's men had surrounded the small house. The elderly woman handed the gun to Daryl, telling him to hide with Carol. She stayed behind to deal with Janette. She lied, claiming that Daryl had already left. Janette sat at the dining table, taking a bite of the scrambled eggs on the table. The steaming food, for neatly arranged plates. All signs indicated that they were lying. Janette was prepared to use their lives to draw out Daryl. Fortunately, Carol arrived at the door, and she killed two of Janette's men. The room fell into chaos instantly. Janette and her men retreated upstairs. Carol chased them up without hesitation. She heard noises through the door panel. Relying on her instincts, Carol fired her gun. Unexpectedly, gunshots attracted soldiers outside. At this critical moment, Daryl climbed to the second floor to provide support. The two have strong combat power, and the situation turned in an instant. Carol picked up the tranquilizer gun on the ground. He gave Janette a shot. What was inside was the mutation serum. Janette, alive, accepted the injection, and soon after, she died. Unfortunately, the elderly woman was shot dead by the soldiers. Carol helped the old man bury the body. She and Daryl drove away. On the other side, the rebels learned that their leader was dead. They ordered Lausanne to be released. After all, their goal was to take out Daryl, and to find the savior, Lauren. With one leader gone, they could just replace her, so Lausanne took Janette's place. At this time, Farouk was with Lauren, running back to the rooftop base. He was instructing the person in charge to protect Lauren at all costs. Suddenly, there was a sound of impact outside the door. Everyone immediately raised their guns to check. To their surprise, the visitor was Corden. Farouk didn't know he had left the organization. He is preparing to deal with Corden. Lauren quickly explained that he was the one who rescued her and Daryl. Upon hearing this, everyone lowered their guard. Corden stated that the castle had fallen, but Janette was dead. However, he was unclear about Daryl and ISA's situation. He only knew that an American woman was looking for Daryl. Lauren guessed from this that Corden was referring to Carol. Meanwhile, Daryl's car overheated and broke down, leaving them no choice but to abandon the car and walk to the city center. Since it was close to the horse breeding farm, Carol planned to visit Ash. On the way, she told Daryl that she had deceived the pilot, saying that this trip was to find her daughter, so he shouldn't reveal any flaws later. She would handle the explanation. They arrived at the place where the plane was stored, only to find that the entrance was sealed with metal sheets. As soon as they opened the door, a trap flew out. Fortunately, Carol reacted quickly. There are zombies stuck in several traps inside the house. There was even a living young man. It turned out that since the plane had just landed, he had been targeted by people nearby. Since Ash left yesterday, he never came back again. The young man begged Daryl to kill him. Daryl did not hesitate and killed him. At this moment, Ash was surrounded by zombies, trapped in an abandoned car. The zombies outside surged toward the car door. Ash hit his head and lost consciousness. Meanwhile, Daryl told Carol not to worry. He had a rough idea of where Farouk might be hiding. He could ask those people to help find Ash. As soon as he finished speaking, the two arrived at the safe camp. Lauren was very happy to see Daryl, but he quickly noticed that ISA was missing. Daryl took Lauren into the bedroom and told her the truth. He hoped Lauren would return to America with him. To his surprise, Lauren refused. She wanted to stay with her friends and not leave. Daryl felt a bit disappointed upon hearing this. Unbeknownst to him, Lauren was not speaking from the heart. She had just witnessed the deaths of those around her. Lauren was afraid Daryl might die because of her. That was why she rejected his proposal. Although life at the rooftop camp was comfortable, Carol was very worried about Ash. Farouk's people went out to search, but they received no news. They could only check the underground bar for information. This place had the most accurate information. After Quinn died last season, the female singer took over here. The underground bar was lively as usual. The bar and the apocalypse outside were like two different worlds. Before Daryl could ask the singer, Carol spotted Ash's fuel barrel on the bar. The female singer said the barrel was brought by two guerrilla fighters from the territory of Janette. After her death, it was already destroyed there. Carol and Daryl immediately headed to the headquarters. The place was filled with zombies, and they couldn't find any living people. Carol carefully checked. Fortunately, Ash was not among the bodies. At that moment, Daryl noticed the zombies downstairs. They were surrounding a car. This indicated that there must be something alive inside the car. The two loaded their guns and charged into the zombie circle. At that moment, only gunfire could be heard, and the sound of axes slicing into zombie flesh. The two reached the car, crawled inside, and closed the door tightly. And indeed, Ash was lying in the driver's seat. Carol hurriedly woke him up.
You look okay. What is that?
After all, she wasn't Carol's daughter. Now they only had one bullet left. Daryl searched for the rear carriage and found a tranquilizer gun filled with the mutation serum. There was no better option now. Daryl decided to take the risk. He leaned out to shoot at two zombies in the distance, firing two tranquilizer darts. Then he closed the sunroof and waited for a reaction. The effect of the zombie plus the virus was indeed powerful. The two enraged super zombies quickly tore their companions to pieces. Blood splattered all over the car windows. The two super zombies suddenly smashed through the windows. Carol shot one dead. Then she teamed up with Daryl to kill the other. After solving them, the three of them left the car. The area was filled with bodies, a sight too unbearable to look at. They took Ash back to the horse breeding farm. He needed to rest because he hadn't eaten for 2 days. He needed some time to recuperate. Daryl couldn't help but remind Carol that she needed to tell Ash the truth as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Lausanne led Janette's guerrillas into the rooftop camp to search for Lauren. Corden told the boy to hide. He picked up a shovel and guarded Lauren behind him. Lausanne stated that he meant no harm on this trip. The guerrillas had joined the Hope Alliance. From now on, we are all brothers and sisters. The people at the rooftop camp tried to lie that Lauren wasn't there, but the guerrilla fighters discovered it. The boy's Rubik's Cube never left his side. Lausanne immediately ordered a search. The guerrillas were about to find Lauren. Farouk rushed out and took a guerrilla hostage. Corden took advantage of everyone's attention shifting. Corden hurriedly took Lauren to escape. However, Lausanne was giving a speech. His brainwashing skills were very powerful, except for Farouk. The other survivors were persuaded by Lausanne again. The scene shifted back to Daryl as he headed alone to the underground bar to solve the issue of the plane fuel. To his surprise, he saw Lauren there. It turned out that Corden had brought him to the singer. Daryl once again pleaded with Lauren to leave with him, but to his dismay, she refused him again.
Why?
I don't want to.
Explain it to me.
I just can't.
Why not?
Because I don't want you to die.
Daryl finally understood Lauren's feelings. He was about to comfort her with a few words. Suddenly, chaos erupted downstairs. Lausanne and his men had searched their way here. The singer led Daryl and the others into a secret passage. Jacinta caught a glimpse of their figures. She informed Lausanne to rush in with people, but only the singer remained in the office. Jacinta looked around and discovered that the tassel on the lamp was swaying in the wind. She felt along the wall and found the secret passage. Lausanne immediately chased after them. Meanwhile, Daryl and Corden will act separately to mislead the enemy's sight. A big battle was about to break out. Daryl instructed Lauren to hide in the fireplace and not come out. He promised he would come back for her. Lausanne discovered that footprints on the ground led in different directions. He and Jacinta split into two groups to pursue. A fierce battle soon broke out between the two sides. Their underlings were quickly eliminated. Now it was just Daryl against Lausanne, and Corden against Jacinta. Although Lausanne was a master of karate, he emphasized non-violent tactics. Lausanne was no match for the experienced Daryl. He failed quickly. Lausanne was killed by Daryl's use of a dead man's skull. Meanwhile, Corden was stabbed by Jacinta. He endured the pain and pulled out the dagger. Corden grabbed Jacinta and slammed her against the wall, knocking her out. But Corden forgot the true situation. Jacinta was not dead and would pose a future threat. At least the main characters had temporarily resolved the crisis. Seeing Ash's health improve, Carol finally mustered the courage to tell the truth. Ash was very angry after hearing it all.
I mean, using your dead daughter to manipulate me. What kind of person does that?
Ash refused to communicate with Carol. Meanwhile, the singer provided the fuel. Daryl finally convinced Lauren to go to America. The two returned to the horse breeding farm together. Ash noticed an extra child there, and he could only suppress his anger. Ash said they had another problem to solve. The plane could only carry 3 people at most. Lauren knew Daryl would stay behind. He had become accustomed to the fact that whenever something good happened, bad things would come to disrupt it. Although Daryl promised he would find a way to go to America, the journey was long and fraught with danger. Lauren always felt this was forever. Meanwhile, and Carol also secretly made up her mind. She asked Lauren and Daryl to go first, just as they faced a difficult choice. Faru and Corden brought a curly-haired girl to a nearby abandoned hospital to look for supplies. They left the curly-haired girl to watch the horses. The two entered the hospital with weapons to search. Most of the zombies here were weak. They gradually let their guard down. Suddenly, a squad from the Alliance launched a surprise attack. They captured Faru immediately. They interrogated Corden about where the plane was hidden. From the female officer's words, it was clear that Jacinta had taken control. The female officer used Faru's life as leverage. She asked Corden to consider whether to confess or not. The next moment, a crossbow bolt flew through the air. Faru and Corden took advantage of the chaos to break free. Immediately after, the curly-haired girl appeared with a bow and arrow. The three quickly counterattacked and killed the Alliance squad. They realized they needed to warn Daryl to be careful. At that moment, Jacinta had ordered people to surround the singer. She wanted to find out where the plane was hidden. The singer was a businesswoman. Even when a gun was pointed at her, she wouldn't engage in a deal without any return.
I help you find the boy. I get the plane. And the pilot.
The scene shifted back to the horse breeding farm. Ash needed to find a long enough hose to siphon fuel from the external tank. This way, they wouldn't have to stop midway. Daryl was beside him, helping by holding the flashlight. He couldn't help but explain a few things on Carol's behalf. Ash didn't say much in response. At the same time, while Carol was talking to Lauren, she realized that Daryl wanted to give up his spot to stay in France. Carol returned the crossbow bolt to her. She wanted to persuade Daryl to take the plane and leave first, but Ash also believed Daryl should stay behind because he had been in France longer. Daryl knew how to survive, and Carol had flying experience. She could assist Ash. Just as she finished speaking, footsteps were heard outside. The three immediately became alert. Fortunately, the newcomers were Faru and the others.
Jacinta's still alive. They are coming for Lauren.
There's no time to waste. They must take off immediately. But the female singer has already brought people close to the racecourse. She stared blankly at the Eiffel Tower on the wall. The singer remembered her conversation with Lauren in the first season. She hoped that child could find a home. Jacinta interrupted her thoughts. She asked which way they should go now. The singer said they can find the runway by crossing the garage. Jacinta requested her to lead the way. The group passed through the dark garage. The singer caught sight of an emergency exit on one side. She smiled at the exit ahead. Then a horde of zombies surged in. The singer quickly pressed against the wall to hide. The squad was surrounded by zombies. Before they could react, Jacinta's arm was bitten as well. She didn't have time to check the wound and retreated immediately. The singer wanted to escape through the emergency exit, but she found that the door wouldn't open. Jacinta quickly closed the wire gate.
God is on our side. God gave up on us a long time ago.
The singer stared at Jacinta until she was knocked down by a zombie. Jacinta left the garage, and she hadn't figured out how to deal with her bite wound. The sound of the plane starting filled her ears. Jacinta immediately led her people to chase after it. Meanwhile, Ash discovered there was a problem with the carburetor. Before he could fix it, Jacinta's people found him. Daryl, Faru, and Corden quickly provided cover for Ash's actions. They began to attack, using the cover of the abandoned equipment, and Ash seized the opportunity to start the plane and head for the runway. Daryl noticed a biker chasing after them. Clearly, he intended to force the plane to stop. As he was about to catch up with Ash, Daryl aimed at the biker. Ash hasn't had a chance to be happy yet. An enemy vehicle approached head-on. Daryl first dealt with the ambush at his side, then he aimed at the driver. At the critical moment, he ran out of bullets. As the two sides were about to collide, suddenly, a gunshot rang out, killing the driver. It turned out that Carol had chosen not to get on the plane. She wanted to stay and fight alongside Daryl. The two watched as the plane, carrying Lauren's sword into the sky. Jacinta was instantly stripped of her resolve. She felt she had no way out. She could only commit suicide before the transformation. Meanwhile, Daryl looked up at the sky. He knew Lauren would surely find the base, the remaining people would unite, and strive to eventually return to America. Farouk found a couple at the underground bar, could help everyone go to England first. In the evening, the group gathered around the bonfire, drinking and chatting. The curly-haired girl and Farouk shared a bond, but no matter what France became, this place would always be her home. The curly-haired girl wanted to stay, to continue searching for her lost family, so she had to say goodbye to Farouk. Living in an apocalypse always brings too many regrets. Many things are constrained by external factors. Corden talked to Daryl about his deceased brother.
You never told me what happened when you killed Michelle.
I didn't kill him.
Although Daryl would not let Michelle go, there was indeed a girl at that time, killed Michelle ahead of him. She also deceived Corden, that it was Daryl who did it. Occasionally, a lie can change the entire outcome of a story. Fortunately, Corden still found the right path. That night, everyone became very emotional. Perhaps it was because the alliance was crumbling one after another. When a person is on edge, only wanting to survive, they have no time to think about anything else. But once they gain a little time, the mental strain and pain will surge upon them like a tide. Fortunately, they still had the hope of survival. The next day, the couple led everyone, arriving at a certain underwater tunnel. This was a tunnel under the English Channel, about 50 kilometers from England. Farouk looked at the tunnel entrance right in front of him. He suddenly changed his mind. Pharaoh doesn't want to leave any more regrets in his short life, so he decided to stay and accompany the curly-haired girl. After bidding farewell to Farouk, the others set off on their journey. The long tunnel was filled with the unknown. After walking a few kilometers, they reached the first checkpoint. The guiding couple asked everyone to lower their weapons. They identified themselves to the people at the checkpoint from a distance. As they approached, they discovered there were no living people at the checkpoint, and it looks like they were killing each other to death. 2 old gas masks lay discarded under the debris. A sense of foreboding washed over them. They decided to leave the outpost as quickly as possible. Unexpectedly, a strange glow emanated from the tunnel ahead. It turned out, there was a large pile of zombies on the ground, and they were covered in glowing moss. Carol felt a wave of dizziness. The others experienced the same symptoms. No wonder there were gas masks at the checkpoint. The air in the tunnel was likely toxic. At that moment, the surrounding zombies gradually awakened. They had to open fire to shoot. They focused their attention on dealing with the zombies, but the toxic gas dulled everyone's nerves, causing them to start hallucinating. Corden was entangled by a zombie. Daryl hurried over to save him. Unexpectedly, Corden shouted, "You killed my brother." Then he lunged at Daryl. The two fell to the ground, wrestling. Daryl didn't want to hurt Corden, so he was temporarily at a disadvantage. The other party were going to kill him. A figure of Michelle suddenly appeared ahead. Corden quickly let go of Daryl and chased after her. At that moment, Daryl remembered the gas masks in the camp. He immediately ran back to get it. There are only 2 masks. The guiding couple knocked Daryl down and took the mask. He lay on the ground, waiting for death to come. Meanwhile, Carol also saw an illusion of her daughter. She uncontrollably walked towards the horde of zombies. In a critical moment, Carol regained some clarity. She wielded her knife and killed a few zombies. In the blink of an eye, the zombie she had pinned down had transformed into her own likeness. Carol froze in place, unable to strike. Then the zombie vanished, leaving only her daughter, holding a doll. Standing in front, Carol embraced Sophia and asked, "Can I go with you?" But her daughter shook off her hand and walked into the darkness. Carol understood this was a farewell. It was time for her to let go of the past. On the other side, Daryl's consciousness was blurred. He actually saw Isa walking slowly towards him. Only then did he remember he had promised to take good care of Lauren. Daryl felt a renewed belief in living on. He shot the couple and watched Isla leave. Soon after, Carol caught up with him. The two put on their masks and continued forward. The story of the second season ends here. This season was not as tight and thrilling as the previous one. The theme shifted to a journey of discovery. The search here not only refers to Carol and Daryl searching for each other, but also the self-discovery journeys of the 2 main characters, including Ash, Farouk, Corden, and a series of characters on their paths of self-discovery. Humanity became the main core of the series. Unfortunately, there are still many things left unclear this season. For example, the identity of Lauren as the savior, and such a charismatic character as Janette. Surprisingly, such a hasty ending was arranged. Daryl seems to be possessed by an unlucky person. Do you have to write Elizabeth dead? Screenwriter. I hope Daryl will have a good ending in the next season. If you enjoy my channel, please click to subscribe.